The case of Nipah virus in India is again rising, specifically in Kerala. When we talk about the Nipah virus, it is a viral infection, and already the infections of Nipah virus was in 2019 as well, but again in 2023 it is taking place. So on about the basics of Nipah virus, it is a viral infection and it is a zoonotic disease. That means it spreads from animal to human transmission as well as human to human transmission. And not only that, it has high mortality rate. And also, to deal with that, there is no vaccine of it. India is currently doing the trials of the vaccine, but it is very long to take place because it is in the first phase itself. So that's why the risks of Nipah virus and the spread is very much high. And to deal with that, there are various initiatives that are going to be taken place. Specifically, we have already talked in the previous lecture that the government of India is basically sent a team, expert team to Kerala to understand the rise of infection. And now India is seeking Australia's aid. And when we talk about Australia's aid, why India is seeking, it is all because the monoclonal antibody Australia had. And in case of India, because of the phase 1 trial is going on, that's why India lacks the monoclonal antibody, but Australia had already tested it, so it has crossed the phase 1 trial. That's why India is approaching Australia so that there can be the curve on the rise of the virus. And this is very serious issue, don't mind, remember the period of corona, so there is a need to proper tracing, contacting and dealing with these infections. Otherwise the rate of infections spread is very much high in case of Nipah virus, we have already seen. So we have discussed this, and if you are liking our initiative, please do like, share, subscribe and expand our channel into your friend circle. And hello and welcome you all. Today is 16th of September and we are going to discuss the daily Hindu newspaper analysis. So we have discussed the some important news. Now we have a course starting on from the 18th of September. If you are interested, you can contact on the given number as mentioned. You can see the contact number here. Okay, so today we have to discuss two important editorial discussion. The first one will be related to genetically modified crops. Specifically, India is focusing on the mustard variety, that is your DMH11, and it is also important for the prelims point of view and mains as well. And when we talk about the basic scenario about the genetic modification, it means what? Modifying the gene of the crop so that we can acquire the certain desired crops and the traits, like the crop may be flood resistant, the crop may be drought resistant, the crop may be the herbicide resistant. All these traits, if we want to be in the crop, then definitely there is a technology going on in the field of biotechnology that is related to the genetic modification. So we will discuss, and from basics, what do you mean by cell, what do you mean by genetic modifications, we are going to discuss definitely. And the second article, it is related to the special session of the parliament. And when we talk about a special session, the constitution doesn't mention about it, but there is a session of parliament. You have already seen like the budget session, monsoon session, winter session. So we will discuss about the parliamentary system of government, the related provisions, the important articles, and ultimately about the special session of the parliament, why it has been announced by the government, what is the agenda of discussions. We will going to discuss all these. So before starting our discussion, you have to attempt the questions of UPSC mains. Explain various types of revolutions took place in the agriculture after independence in India, how these revolutions have helped in poverty alleviation and food security in India. तो यहाँ पर आपको ग्रीन रेवोल्यूशन की बात तो जरूर करनी है, साथ ही साथ जो आपका जेनेटिक मॉडिफिकेशन आज के समय में चल रहा है, इट इज रिलेटेड टू द BT cotton as well. It can be related to the DMH11, which is a genetic modification of the traditional mustard oil or the edible oil. तो यहाँ पर आपको elaborate article discussion करना है. You can get the answer from our editorial discussion of today, and also you have to attempt the prelims question. That is very very important. Parliament topic is very much important, specifically to the prelims. In fact, on average 2 to 3 questions yearly basis asks related to the parliament topic. That's why it is very important, and why we have chosen this topic in today's discussion. It is all because of that. So you will understand about the basics. Be with me, and please do like, share, subscribe, so that your friend circle will get benefited along with you, and make the session interactive. And whenever we ask you a question, please try to answer them in the comment box, so that your thinking capability ability will be opened, and that is the requirement of the UPSC examination, and also for your overall development. So starting our discussion with the first article, and it will be related to GS paper 3, and the topic here of the focus is biotechnology. Can you tell me about the term biotechnology means? What do you mean by biotechnology? Means using the technology into the biology. That means biotechnology. That's why genetic modification and vaccines we derive, we make, all comes into the field of biotechnology. It is a umbrella term. Just like nanotechnology, biotechnology is also an umbrella term. So we have given you about idea of the basics. So when we talk about genetically modified crop, you need to understand about the basics of the cell. So here we have taken the picture of bacteria cell structure. When we talk about the cell, it is the basic fundamental unit of life. You have already studied in the NCERT books building blocks of the life, and it is like the structure you can see. Specifically in the bacterial cell, there is the cytoplasm, cell membrane, cell capsule, nucleoid, plasmid. But what we are concerned here is about the nucleoid. What is nucleoid? It is basically the genetic material which is inside the cell, which contains the information, which contains the genetic quality. What we do in the genetic modification, we take out the qualities from this genetic material and try to insert into the crop or the plant to get the quality of that cell, to get the trait of that cell. For example, here is a picture. It is a picture of bacteria, and this is the nucleoid. That is means the genetic material. What we are doing in the genetic modification, basically we are taking out the good quality traits from the genetic material. This is the genetic material. We have extracted the DNA and isolated, and this extracted material gets inserted into the crop or the plants that we want the desire for the crops to be. So we do insert into the plants, and after inserting, the modified crops gets transformed, and you can get the desired character. Why we are focusing on genetic modification? It is all because of the climate change, global warming, its impact on the food security, all of these. And the genetic modification, it aims to be like if there is a drought like condition, then the plants may not be able to survive, the traditional plant or the traditional crops. So if we are able to insert some of the qualities of other cells that can able to afford, or that can able to resist to the drought, then definitely it will be very beneficial. That's why the genetic modification is very very important, and we are using in our crops. We are using for the nutritional safeguard, we are using for increasing the quantity of production, we are using for the climatic resilience, many more things we will discuss about it. Okay, so if we talk about the types of genetic modification, there are three main types of genetic modification. One is transgenic, one is cisgenic, one is subgenic. When we talk about transgenic, name already suggests, means the plant have genes inserted from them that are derived from the other species. Transgenic means the gene getting inserted from the other species, not related to the same species. That is the transgenic. So you can see here. Okay. And when we talk about cisgenic, it means organism containing only its own genes or those of sexually compatible organism. Moreover, it is belonging to the same species in simple terms. And when we talk about the cisgenic, we have already discussed it. Okay. So you have to understand all these. So why India is focusing on the genetic modified crops? Why the world is focusing on genetically modified crops? First of all, achieving the global food and nutritional security, because climate change is a big threat for the humanity, and climate change does not only impact humans but also the crops, the biodiversity, and what is our life. It is basically the crops that we eat. So definitely there is a need to make resilient of our agriculture, and to make resilient there is a need for genetic modification. And what the benefit that they gives: enhanced yields, output, adaptability across environment, along with insects and herbicide resistant, nutritional quality improvement. These all are the benefits that are provided. And according to the Global Food Security and Nutritional Report 2019, it is difficult to achieve the zero hunger target by 2030, because the traditional crops will not able to increase the production or the productivity. But when we shift to the genetically modified crops, it will give you the higher yield. However, there is also the negative concerns about this. But in this article, the major focus is about the benefits. So we will focus on benefits only here. Okay. In another article, we will discuss about the negative consequences, but here we will focus on the positive impact. So to defect and to go through about the production or the output, we have applied green revolution in the 1960s 70s. And why the green revolution? Because we were lacking the food security, and we have to be dependent on America, Russia, to feed our population. But after the green revolution, we became self-sufficient. But that green revolution was not able to deal with the nutritional security or the climate change, because climate change is basically something recent phenomena, specifically after the industrial revolution. That's why when the green revolution came, that revolution doesn't focus on the climate change and the impact on the crops, but now we have to focus on the climate resilient crops. That's why we are focusing on GM crops. Okay. And one important data you should note, that the green revolution in India, which was started in 1960s and 70s, resulted in enhanced production of the food from 50 million tons in 1950-51 to over 300 million tons in 2020-21. That is the biggest achievement we can say about the Indian agriculture. Now the global adoption is increasing about the genetically modified crops, and you can see from the data that comes from the International Service for the Acquisition of Agriculture Biotech Application 2020, which says a total of 72 countries have adopted GM crops either as human food or animal feed. And also 56% of the global genetically modified crop area is in developing country, compared to the 44% in industrial country. That's a logic itself, because the number of developing countries is very much high as compared to the developed country. When we talk about developed country, it is basically the US, the Japan, the Britain, and all these Western countries mainly. So that's why the area under the GM crop will be high in the developing countries itself. And there is an economic advantages, like farmers gets enhance production. That means farmers will get more income from the genetically modified crops once they cultivate it. And there is a case study of bt cotton in India, and bt cotton is basically commercially cultivated in India after the approval from the Ministry of Environment, and that has benefited the farmer the most. That is the important point. And also the global level genetic modification of the crops has expanded its reach, and now various nations not only focused on the four crops which is genetically modified, but more than the four crops as well, like we have focused on genetically modified maize, soybean, cotton, canola. It is world over. But when we talk about India's case, then India has only allowed bt cotton. Okay, why bt cotton? Because it has the potential to give higher output, but there is a very much concerns about the genetically modified crop. That's why once upon a time bt brinjal was approved, but it was extracted out from the government decision for the cultivation. Why? Because it was having some concerns. That's why. And now government of India is focusing on the genetically modified mustard. Okay, we will discuss about the mustard as well. When we talk about the significance, so significance is very much for the genetically modified crops, like the genetically modified crops has amounted to 2 to 4.9 billion dollar savings in the economic benefits to more than 16 million farmers across the globe, and 95% of whom are from developing countries. And also there was a concern about the biosafety, that it will harm the environment, biodiversity, and in the longer term there will be more impact on the human health. But after the adoption of GM crops, there has been approx 20 years, there are no such concerns occurring on or the reflecting on the scientific basis. So the biosafety concerns also gets minimized here. So one important point is that, you know. Now when we talk about other points about India's focus on GM mustard, you have to understand about GM mustard. GM mustard means what? Genetically modified mustard. And why India is more focusing on it is all because India is very much dependent on edible oil import. India is one of the largest consumer, largest importer, and largest producer of mustard, of the edible oil. But when we focus on the consumption, then consumption is very much high. That's why we need to have the import dependency. And you can see that 60% of India's demand being met by imports. That's why to have the edible oil security, we are focusing to enhance the production, and the production may be enhanced by the genetic mustard. But you must know the commercial cultivation of GM mustard is not allowed. It is still on the experimental stage. Once the experiment finishes, and after research and data analysis, if that is good as respect to the biosafety, then definitely it will be commercially allowed. But still it is in research stage, it is in the experimental stage. Okay, so what are the significance of GM mustard? So first of all, its per hectare yield, when we talk about, will increase, as like in the current scenario, because of the traditional mustard there is very much low per hectare yield as compared to the global average. Along with the GM mustard will help in economic well-being of the farmers' self-sufficiency. That's why using genetic engineering, GM mustard hybrid, you should remember the name DMH11, created at the Center for Genetic Manipulation of Crop Plants, University of Delhi. And this GM mustard hybrid is based on Barnage Pasteur system. And you can remember this name because in the UPSC prelims it can be a question that the recently used Barnage Pasteur system is about what? It is basically about the GM mustard hybrid, and it is government funded project. About 70 crore post it has been spent, and we have already discussed what are its advantage, like better yield, and it will also lower the cost of farmers. And सबसे important बात, it is about the hybridization of the edible oil or the GM mustard. Why hybridization? Because the current mustard crop is self-pollinating, and because of the self-pollinating, they are not able to give the higher yield. But once it gets hybridized, then definitely the production will increase. That is the biggest benefit that are going to have for the GM mustard. So this is the case. And when we talk about GM regulation in India, what do you mean by GM regulation? Because when we talk about genetically modification, it is very much concerns. It can affect the biodiversity. It can affect the environment. No one knows about the long-term consequences. That's why there is a proper regulation of it. That's why India hasn't approved the BT brinjal. India hasn't approved the commercial cultivation of the genetically modified mustard. Why all these? Because there is a need for proper analysis and understanding before releasing into the commercial purpose of the commercial cultivation. That's why GM regulation becomes very significant. And when we talk about the provisions of the regulation, there is a statutory provisions like the rules for manufacture, use, import, export and storage of hazardous microorganisms, genetically engineered organism. ये जो आपका लंबा सा नाम मिल रहा है, this is basically the statutory provisions. Along with there is a statutory bodies like the Genetic Engineering Appraisal Committee. It comes under Ministry of Environment. Okay, along with Recombinant DNA Advisory Committee, along with Institutional Biosafety Committee. These all are the body, but the main head of the regulation of genetically modified crop is basically the Ministry of Environment. You should remember. Okay, and in the Ministry of Environment, there is Genetic Engineering Appraisal Committee that recommends the genetically modified crops to be commercially allowed or not. Okay, but the final decision maker is the Ministry of Environment. That should be kept into the mind. And on October 25, 2022, the Genetic Engineering Appraisal Committee made a landmark decision of approving the environmental release of DMH11. It is environmental release. It is about environmental release, not about the commercial release. Kindly note this. Okay, and the advancement will benefit the farmers by increasing the yield per hectare. Along with the while import burden, we import huge value in terms of money, and that will help to save 1.17 lakh crore in 2020 to 21. And also it will help achieve much needed self-reliance in the edible oil production. So we have discussed all the basics and the understandings. Now we are shifting our focus to the GS paper 2. That is very important, and the topic of parliament, it needs to be carefully understand. So what and why about it in news? It is all because a special session of the parliament being called by the government, and the special session will held from the 18th of September to 23rd of September. That means 5-day session. What is the agenda of session? No clarity. Even the government hasn't provided for clear agenda. That's why opposition raises concerns about the aim of the session, about the agenda of discussion, but there is no much concerns. There is no much clarity. So there is a speculation itself why this session will happen. For example, government has given some clarity that in this session there will be a discussion on the bills regarding the appointment process of chief election commissioner and election commissioners, and we have already discussed about the appointment procedure of the chief election commissioner, and government has brought a bill regarding this. And can you comment about the appointment procedure of the chief election commissioner? Okay, and also there is a speculation like there will be a debate on the parliamentary journey of 75 years since India has achieved 75 years of independence. So what are the achievements, what are the expectations, what the India is focusing on, all will be discussed. And there is one more speculation that maybe this session will be the last session to be held in the old parliamentary building, because already we have the new parliament building constructed. So the discussion after this will be going to be shifted onto the new parliamentary building. That is the point, and that is the speculation. Okay, so it is like farewell address, and you should know about the basics of parliamentary building, because UPSC is now keen to ask these type of question. When we talk about the Delhi and the various structures and the buildings of the government, the Delhi was designed by who? By two important personality. One is your Herbert Baker and one is your Edwin Lutyens. You can see the name. And when you will visit to the Rashtrapati Bhavan, there is a museum, and that will talk about the history of the parliamentary building, the history of the Delhi as a capital for the British, why it shifted and when it shifted, it will talk about. So better you once go to the Rashtrapati Bhavan and the museum as well, because there is a certain period when the Rashtrapati Bhavan gets open for the visitors. Okay. And when we talk about the new parliamentary building, it is triangular shaped, inaugurated by Prime Minister Modi on 28th of May. And why there is a need of new building? It is all because in the parliamentary seat of constituency, the delimitation commission delimit the number of seats. Why delimits? Because of the increasing population. That's why when the number of seats will increase, the old parliamentary building will not able to accommodate it. So we needed the extra seats, and that will be fulfilled by the new parliamentary building. So that is the point. But the article says democracy is not about buildings, but it is about building the opposition, strengthening the opposition. Okay, and without the role of opposition, democracy is in disturbance. That is the point. And you can also understand the role of opposition, because the opposition helps to discuss on important matters, the negatives, positives of the bills. That's why the opposition becomes important. And when we talk about the session of the parliament, so India follows parliamentary system of government. When we talk about parliamentary system of government, you should always remember that the council of minister is responsible to the Lok Sabha or to the lower house. In fact, the parliamentary system of government is followed both at central level and both at the state level. And the parliamentary system of government is also known as cabinet system of government. And also India's parliament has no fixed calendar of sitting. Means there is no restriction that the parliament has to sit in particular period of time, but it will depend on the government when it want to bring the session. And also the parliament holds 3 sessions in a year, that is your budget session, the monsoon session, and the winter session. Can you comment which session recently passed in the previous month? You can understand by this year month mentioned here. Okay. And when we talk about determining the sessions, the cabinet committee on parliamentary affairs determines the date and duration of parliamentary session. But when we talk about the summoning of the session, the calling of the session, it is the president who summons the session based on the committee's discussion, based on the committee's decisions. Okay, so we have discussed about it. And when we talk about a special session, remember constitution doesn't define the special session. And when we talk about summon, we have already discussed that article 85 clause 1 talks about the president to summon a regular parliamentary session. Okay, and who will chair the session? So the presiding officers of the house will chair the session. That means the Raj Sabha has the presiding officer, it is the vice chairman, and for the Lok Sabha it is a speaker who chairs the Lok Sabha. That is the point, that is the basic understanding. So we have discussed all the article in detail. Hope you understood, and definitely you should attempt the questions that we have given you so that you can understand the basics. So friends, we have discussed all the articles in this, and for now, thank you very much for the discussion. We will meet again with our new discussion.